Has Tekken gotten to anime? The typical answers are that yes, it has, or no, because Tekken has always been anime. And I'd say my answer had always aligned with the former, but I really wanted to examine this and separate my bias having grown up with the series, to arrive at a definitive answer for this debate that re-emerges for every new character release. So to definitively answer this question, I've gone through each of the 8 mainline Tekken games and put every character in a tier based on if I think they're anime or not. In this video, I'll be highlighting some of the placements, and at the end, we'll discuss what this all means. So we're on the same page. Anime here can refer to any fantastical or unrealistic elements. For example, Tekken's art style can be considered anime. The story is definitely anime. You know, a 100-pound teenage girl casually launching a 300-pound man several feet into the air. Yep, that all checks out. There's an inherent suspension of disbelief that we must accept as a baseline. And generally speaking, universal mechanics like jumping or juggle combos are within the baseline and are discounted. But any individual characteristics outside of that are fair game. I put characters into 4 tiers based off their fighting style and aesthetics in game. The first tier is pure hands. Realistic martial arts or grounded fictional fighting style. Again, realistic can be a slippery term here. Even in real martial arts, there are embellishments of movements to highlight impact or technique, which may not even be that effective outside of that martial art or combat sport. So if the game is embellishing real martial arts, it's okay for pure hands. The next category is mostly hands, right? Grounded fighting style with rare use of real weapons, or over-the-top fictional fighting styles. These are still hand-to-hand combat in my eyes, but maybe not as traditional as pure hands. The next category is called kinda anime, and in here it includes beings that look out of place, right? Especially in the context of a hand-to-hand combat tournament, or fighting styles and special powers that are not humanly possible. And the last category is pure anime. Prominent use of non-human fighting styles, use of special powers or conjured weapons. The question being answered here is whether a character is anime or not. So I've only put the cast into 4 tiers just to show a distinction in those 2 groups. Anything more than that I don't think is really useful for such a subjective topic, but real simply, the 2 hands tiers are for characters that I think throw hands more realistically, and the 2 anime tiers are for characters that I think are anime or over the top. Feel free to follow along for where you think that these characters belong in each of these games. And with that, let's just get into it with Tekken 1. Tekken 1 is the start of the series and understandably the least refined. The cast is visually diverse, but a lot of characters are doing basic kicks and punches here, and a lot of animations are shared between them. Because of that, most characters, Law, Paul, Nina, Kazuya, etc., they're going into pure hands. Even still, there are some standout characters that come outside of that category. The first being Jack. I have him in mostly hands. He's a robot, which I would have in kinda anime, but looks human in this game and uses grounded moves, so I'm okay with giving him the edge into the hands categories. Prototype Jack though, yeah, P-Jack was looking pretty crazy in Tekken 1, not gonna lie. Looking like his parts were assembled by Sid from Toy Story, a reference almost as old as this game. P-Jack's moves is still pretty grounded, so I'm gonna go with kinda anime for him. Next is Yoshimitsu, my guy. He uses a weapon that puts him into mostly hands by itself, but he also looks absolutely outlandish. Here we have a guy in a mask and armor spinning around in his attacks, but even if his moves are grounded, or at least kinda grounded, the sheer goofiness of his appearance and moves combined pushes him into kinda anime with Prototype Jack. Kunimitsu also uses weapons, but her whatever design is much more tame and otherwise has a grounded fighting style like Yoshimitsu and everyone else in this game, so I put her in actually mostly hands. Lastly, we have Kuma. He's a bear. Whenever people say Tekken has always been anime, Kuma is patient zero. Having a bear in your martial arts tournament definitely throws off your suspension of disbelief in a hand-to-hand combat scenario, and I definitely think he's anime, but his attacks really aren't anything crazy, so I have him in kinda anime in these tiers as well. Like I said earlier, the move lists in Tekken 1 are at their most basic, and I found none of them to be outlandish enough to put any character in the pure anime tier, but that will be changing in Tekken 2. For most of these games, the characters really don't change enough to move out of tiers, so to speed things along, I'll be touching on any that do and on the new characters in each entry. And for Tekken 2, we have Baek Do-san, Bruce Irving, Lei Wulong, and Jun Kazama, and they're all pure hands, and rightfully so. These characters really start to show more traditional martial arts in their movesets. Prototype Jack gets his well-needed glow up as well in Tekken 2, but is still kind of anime. Same with Alex. They are non-human characters, but their moves are still pretty grounded. Finally though, we get our first entry in the pure anime tier, being Devil Kazuya, or just Devil. He flies, he shoots lasers, and is literally a mythical being. No question at all about placing in pure anime. So now we have a little bit better of a metric of what kind of things are in this tier. This is a good time to mention that palette swap characters are in fact counted as part of this review, meaning that Angel and Roger go into pure anime and kinda anime respectively. Depending on the tier list I got, the icons for these characters may or may not be shown, but they are definitely accounted for in the charts. Now we have the big Tekken 3 with a new generation of characters. Characters that are direct successors like Julia Chung, Jin Kazama, and Hua Rong stay in the pure hands category. New characters like Ling Xiaoyu, Eddie Gordo, and Brian Fury I put into the pure hands category just because of the representation of their moves. I think they're pretty traditional and grounded. I really needed to lock down my criteria in this game because of how much more robust everyone's movesets and animations are becoming. Trying to separate unarmed characters here as more or less realistic got really messy, so putting all these characters in pure hands allow the placements later on to make more sense. For now in Tekken 3, I'm pushing Yoshimitsu into pure anime. He was borderline in Tekken 2 already with the new moves he got in that game, but moves like Flea and especially his redesign in Tekken 3 cements him as pure anime. Mokujin and Dr. B, I'm putting on the anime side of things. For Dr. B, being a frail old man using moves by other characters is wacky enough as it is, but combined with electrocuting himself and the impossible moves he shares with Yoshimitsu, I think he fits as pure anime. For Mokujin, I think it's debatable how to treat him as a Capri character since how he fights changes from round to round. For these tier lists, I decided to discount his gameplay entirely, so I put him in kinda anime for being a sentient piece of wood. Now if you would put Mokujin in pure anime, I really wouldn't disagree, but I think he's a step below the others in pure anime, the newcomers being Ogre, True Ogre, and Gon. True Ogre and Gon very obviously being put into pure anime, one being a fire-breathing chimera and the other literally being an anime character or a manga character. Ancient Ogre I think is a little bit more debatable since his moves are really not so extreme, but just like Devil, being a mythical creature pushes him into the pure anime territory in my eyes. Tekken 3 was a landmark game in the series, so I think it's interesting to see how the distribution of characters were in this game because it really represented what the vast majority of people thought of Tekken as. This all changes of course in Tekken 4. This game was something of a soft reset for the series, having a much more subdued, darker tone and stripping down the roster size while not outright replacing the characters like they did in Tekken 3. So it's interesting which characters they decided to keep, because basically they end up removing the more anime characters of the roster. The bosses of Tekken 3, Ogre and True Ogre were removed, as were Gunjack, Mokujin, and Dr. B. Meanwhile, the true newcomers, Steve Fox and Craig Marduk, and returning characters like Lee and Kazuya are all pure hands with fairly grounded or martial arts based fighting styles. Marduk is pretty cool with his MMA fighting style, but I really like how Steve was implemented in Tekken with his weaving and boxing and lack of kicks at all. Combot, as a robot copy character, I put in the kinda anime in the same vein as I put Prototype Jack, Gunjack, and Mokujin from the other games. That means with the Bears and Yoshimitsu, there are really only 4 characters in Tekken 4 that I would even consider anime. As a reminder, I am counting palette swaps as characters, so Panda, Miharu, Eddie, and even Violet is fair game since what you press on the screen doesn't negate what you see and experience playing in game. This is also easy to justify when there's also those really weird like hitbox differences or like super obscure differences in move properties and interactions, so counting them as characters covers all bases. Regardless, it's clear that Tekken 4 was meant to be a much more grounded fighting game, and along with the stages being much more realistic, it's reflected in the vast majority of the cast being pure hands. Tekken 5, however, does not keep this up, and it expands the roster and the types of characters in the game. Many old characters return like Beck, Roger, and Bruce, but since they're pretty much the same anime tier as before they left, let's talk about the new characters in Tekken 5. we actually got quite a few new characters in the pure anime tier. Raven, Devil Jin, Jinpachi, all joining Yoshimitsu in this tier. Devil Jin and Jinpachi are self-explanatory, but Raven I feel like could have been in the kind of anime tier. Raven is in pure anime because not only is his moveset over the top, he has moves where he literally teleports and phases through people. Other Tekken 5 debut fighters, Asuka Kazama, Feng Wei, and Sergei Dragunov, are all in the pure hands tier. Asuka taking the place of Jun for her Kazama style traditional martial arts. And real quick, I gotta say, I forgot how cool Asuka was. Introduced as avenging her father's dojo, she was serious about her martial arts but also not afraid to give you a kick in the teeth if you deserved it. With the Kazama name, she had so much potential back then outside of just being Lily's tsundere rival. Speaking of Lily, I'm putting her in mostly hands. She doesn't use a weapon, but mostly hands is also for those fighting styles that are not quite anime and not quite pure hands either. And it was hard to define a realistic fighting style for a fighting game, since there are standards we collectively accept as realistic due to the suspension of disbelief we have to apply for the game mechanics anyway. But ultimately, exaggerated martial arts and combat-based fighting styles are cleared for pure hands. Lily though, her fighting style is gymnastics. She's not even fighting you, she's just doing her routine and your collateral damage. So that's why she's in mostly hands, right? A tiny bit of anime, if you will. And I'm not hating on Lily, but I think she is a vibes first, fighting second kind of character that we'll see more of as we go into the next games. So for the beloved Tekken 5, we have a mix of categories populated with the majority of cast still being in pure hands. But we'll see how that changes going forward. When thinking about the anime-ification of Tekken over time, my thought going into this video was that it really kicked off in Tekken 6. Lars and Elisa were the face of Tekken's anime direction, Elisa being a cute, polite, uwu robot juxtaposed with the destruction stance and retractable chainsaws. She's clearly pure anime. But Lars, ooh, I wanted so bad to put Lars in pure anime too, and if it was 2009, I would've. His cool, flashy moveset and design could basically be described as anime hero, but because he doesn't have any special powers, abilities, or weapons, I still don't feel pure anime is quite appropriate if I'm holding all the games to the same criteria. That in itself would support that Tekken has been getting more anime over time, but let's keep talking Tekken 6, kinda anime for Lars. Zafina joins Lily in mostly hands due to her fighting style where she looks less interested in inflicting damage than striking exotic poses. So this tier right now is basically just divas. I also would have had Bob here for his unrealistic fighting style, but I'm actually pushing him to kinda anime. Is it because he's built like a beach ball? Yes it is. His moveset was anime enough as it is, but he's doing all the spinning, jumping, flipping while also being like 400 pounds. Bob's knees so strong Goku wants to fight them. And judging by his character, I think Bob would be perfectly happy being in the anime category as a testament to his success of his training. The remaining Tekken 6 newcomers, Miguel and Leo, go into pure hands. Leo's portrayal of Baji Quan is probably my favorite martial art in all of Tekken. Admittedly, Miguel's fighting style as a street brawler is a lot more fictional, but I have him in pure hands because his attacks are not flashy and look like they're actually for fighting. Despite being the game where many consider Tekken turned anime, myself included, the distribution of characters that I consider anime in Tekken 6 is actually pretty close to that of Tekken 5. Even if that is the case for Tekken 6, the anime-ification is undeniable for Tekken 7. Now before we go over the characters, it's worth mentioning that Tekken 7 is the first of the mainline Tekken games to introduce rage arts. These are cinematic supers that each character has access to at low health. Since rage arts is a mechanic that everyone has access to, like juggle combos and also the newly introduced power crush, and because the attacks are practically in a cutscene, I'm not inclined to weigh the rage arts too heavily when it comes to any character's anime level. That said, I do think rage arts definitely contribute to Tekken feeling more anime as a whole due to the overtop cinematics now interlaced with the gameplay. Fortunately, the home release of Tekken 7 also had rage drives as a way to consume your rage states, so you didn't necessarily see rage arts every round. It would really suck if there was only one way to consume that resource, vastly increasing the amount of times you'd be forced to engage in this non-interactive aspect of the game at any given round with no way to bypass or shorten it. Anyway, on to the characters in Tekken 7. There are a few newcomers that I have as pure hands like Josie, Lydia, and Leroy. Lydia and Leroy being immediate fan favorites with their designs and martial arts. It's also in Tekken 7 where we get a few more additions to the mostly hands tier, namely Katarina, Shaheen, and Negan. Negan is here because he's a guy beating people with the bat, but besides that, I don't find his attacks or aesthetic particularly anime. He's here for his weapon use. Katarina and Shaheen are both here because I feel like in both their cases, their movesets are vibe first, martial arts second, where it looks like their attacks were put together to be cool. I still don't think these characters are anime, just to be clear, but for the people that are martial arts purists, Shaheen and Kat might be outside of that category. Surprisingly, I also have Lucky Chloe in Mostly Hands. Before this whole thing, I thought for sure I'd have Lucky Chloe on the anime side, but after constraining myself to the criteria, I think she's in the same tier as Lily with her breakdancing attacks. Zafina, however, flips to kinda anime. The change is because of the Azazel hand and powers she uses in her moves, which make her a bit more anime. A change, by the way, I really like. I think Zafina is sick with the demon arm, and shows an advancement in lore that most characters don't get. Fahkumram and Kazumi might be the most controversial placements in this whole video. Fahkumram was really tough. On one hand, his Muay Thai fighting style is one of the most traditional and authentic in the entire roster, but his body proportions are so exaggerated that it breaks my suspension of disbelief. I was very close to putting him in kinda anime. What stopped me though was thinking of the very crazy physiques possible in real life, especially with PEDs. Obviously there's a limit, but is Fahkumram at that limit? I really don't know. Maybe, but for this analysis, I'm just gonna put Fahkumram in pure hands. I'm a kind god, you're welcome Michael Murray. Kazumi I also had in kinda anime. Her appearance and the majority of her attacks are pretty modest, but some of her key moves are not. The little float she does is definitely supernatural, but what really changed my mind was the tiger. Because summoning a tiger to attack for you is some of the most anime shit you can possibly do. Like really, you're gonna do a DP, then the tiger does a DP? Yo, and she's hitting the pose? Nah, she gotta go in pure anime. And honestly, the remainder of the Tekken 7 newcomers, Gigas, Claudio, Eliza, Kunimitsu Jr., they're all in pure anime too. Gigas for being some kind of hulking experiment, and the others for their prolific use of special powers in their attacks and movements. This also applies to the remaining guest characters in Tekken 7, Akuma, Geese Howard, and Noctis, all very clearly pure anime. Akuma and Geese were a little bit more accepted because they're dope boss characters from other fighting games. Their gameplay mechanics were a different story, but as far as characters go, they were pretty welcomed, though I don't think the same can be said for Noctis. Tekken 7 really introduced a huge amount of characters, some of that are pure hands, but even more they're absolutely anime. So this leads us to Tekken 8, which coming from 7 is still a whole new ballgame. Tekken 8 universal changes again have made the game look more spectacular and fantastical, but to an even greater degree. To go over those changes real quickly, more special effects and installs which make it seem like many more characters have special powers, heat activation introducing a time stop for dramatic effect similar to Rage Arts, heat dashes having animation cancels that were previously reserved for the 2D inspired characters, Rage Arts return, but the cutscenes are even more stylized and abstract. I still don't know what's going on with Armor King's Rage Art. Rage Arts are also now the only way to use your rage, making them much more frequent. So all these changes, especially the ones that interrupt the fluidity of combat, make Tekken 8 look very different and more anime. Those universal changes don't count for my tiers here, but there's also changes in the character level to an extent that we haven't seen before. Characters like Brian, Asuka, Eddie, Leo have additional effects with their installs, but since they're visual effects for us players, I'm not counting them as special powers. They stay in pure hands. Law, Nina, and Anna come out of the pure hands category because now they use weapons. Law's in mostly hands because of his close range nunchucks. The Williams sisters, however, cross the anime line because of their gun projectiles. Like now we have to pretend that getting shot multiple times by firearms doesn't just end your whole life right there. Anna more so because she has a whole retractable bazooka that is holstered somehow that she doesn't even have to reload. I love her design, but I'm surprised that Anna fans weren't more upset that no matter what stylish fit you give her, you gotta look at this floating bazooka. Pure anime. Kazuya slides all the way to pure anime now that his double form is integrated with his attacks. The same is said for Jin, who doesn't have a complete transformation but has many devil-inspired moves that dramatically change his overall fighting style. I also have both of the kings shifting to mostly hands with the increased emphasis on wrestling throws integrated with their attacks. This isn't bad, but these are big losses for the pure hands tier regardless. What was really exciting in Tekken 8 though was finally the canonical return of Jun Kazama. She's been in the tag games, but the last mainline appearance was way back in Tekken 2. In all the games, however, she's pure hands. and we see it even in the Tekken Bloodlines anime shortly before Tekken 8's release. Jin, you must concentrate. Kazama style is a technique that allows you to face opponents of any size or strength. It requires absolute focus and form. You must first conquer yourself, and only then can you snipe people full screen with your energy beam. I see. Wait, what? Jun returns in Tekken 8, and with her new mysterious powers, she's more anime than in the actual anime. Pure anime tier she goes. Jack and Zafina move up to pure anime because their powers are more prominent in their movesets. Reina, Victor, and Azucena are the newcomers in the launch of Tekken 8, and they're all in different tiers here. Azucena I have in mostly hands with her mix of MMA and caffeine-fueled dancing. Reina is kind of anime. She puts up the hands, but it looks like she has actual lightning powers besides just the move effects that puts her on the anime side in my opinion. In fact, I put Tekken 8 Lars in pure anime for the same reason, but honestly he was on thin ice anyway. Next we have Victor. Next we have Clive from Final Fantasy as a guest character, and like Noctis in Tekken 7, his pure anime with all of his powers. And finally we have our newest addition to Tekken 8, Tekken original character miary-zo, and she is pure anime. Independent of her fighting style, the use of her powers and conjured weapons clearly make her on the anime side. Now, while editing this video, Kunimitsu, Bob, and Roger Jr. were announced as the DLC characters for Season 3. Since they're not out to see their full gameplay, I can't technically place them in a category yet. If their previous iterations are anything to go by though, I think you have an idea of where they end up. So even besides the universal changes in Tekken 8, which are significant, the characters themselves indicate a far greater emphasis on special abilities. So much so that this is actually the first time there are as many characters that I consider anime as those that are purely hand-to-hand combat. Throughout the Tekken series, we can see an increase of characters with fantasy or anime elements, the sole exception being Tekken 4, which served as a sort of reset. But now we can see for sure with basis that the anime-ification is real. Now these charts just have percentages. When we stack the distribution across the games side by side, we can see the effective roster size. Generally speaking, the larger the roster, the greater amount of these anime characters. I wonder how people would feel now about another reset that strips down the roster size in a mainline game. Okay, so Tekken has always had anime or wacky characters, and there's been more and more of them with each installment of the series. Even so, what's the big deal? I'd say that fighting games are defined by their characters and what they do, and when you add enough characters and mechanics that are over the top, then your game also becomes over the top. What was enjoyed as a spice to your cuisine can quickly become an upset to your palate when overused. Fans of Tekken that have been with this series for a while enjoy it as a fighting game centered on the hand-to-hand combat with a few exceptions for the wacky over-the-top characters. The close, grounded fighting is the main draw, and the wackiness served as a quirk to distinguish the game from its peers. But preferences aside, is going anime for Tekken an inherently bad thing? Martial arts movies, action movies, professional wrestling, shonen anime. The depiction of the power fantasy has taken many different forms, each having periods of dominance in the cultural mainstream. In terms of its arts and visuals, I think Tekken has been a series that has kept up with the times, and now the popularity of anime has skyrocketed since the early days of the series. The popular media that Tekken takes inspiration from has itself changed over time. There's many players that adore these flashy anime Tekken characters. Even as someone that prefers Tekken with the more grounded characters and fighting styles, I myself have mostly played characters that are in the pure anime tier. Would it be hypocritical of me to find these characters interesting while also advocating for less of these types of characters? For example, I never thought Goku would fit into Tekken. As much as I like the character, I'm not interested in shoehorning a version of Goku that can't fly, instant transmission, or Kamehameha. But if Tekken itself changed so that characters can fly and stuff, then at that point Goku could fit into Tekken. By expanding the types of characters that can be put into a Tekken game, the series positions itself to have even more diverse casts and options for guests, attracting even more players to Tekken that were not as interested otherwise. That sounds good from a business standpoint. However, when thinking of the fans of Tekken as a community, this expansion to the scope of what Tekken is means an expansion of players that may not enjoy what we love about past Tekken and be more willing to turn it further into something else. These are things that players are pretty protective of, as there's a large demographic of people that don't care at all about thematic consistency. As you could probably tell by this video, I wouldn't consider myself part of that group of people, but even with that said, I cannot say the anime-ification of Tekken is objectively bad, but it is a change. A loss of a part of Tekken identity that many dedicated fans bought into, and the gain, be it more different types of characters and players, may or may not be worth the loss depending on the person. At the end of the day, we all want cool characters that do cool shit, anime or not. So that is the anime-ification of Tekken. I appreciate a like on the video if you enjoyed it. It was honestly a lot more than I thought it was going to be. But as always, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and catch you in the next one.